Pull out your hose and grab your can. We're about to integrate another Pest Geek podcast. Hi, everybody. Frank Hernandez here, and welcome to the Pest Geek podcast, bringing you the latest information on pests, products, and politics from today's leading industry sources to help you start, manage, and grow your pest control business.
Stephen Vantassel here, wildlife control consultant, giving you another episode of Living the Wildlife. Wanted to talk today about dealing with difficult, or maybe I should just simply say angry clients. A client that was just simply angry for whatever reason at your service. And the reason why this came up is I was spending some time with a friend of mine because I like to do ride-alongs whenever I can, and we went out to this particular client's place, and my colleague did a thorough inspection, and I was helping a little bit, but he was crawling around the attic, and he gave the lady a price before he even arrived of what the inspection would cost. So that was clear from the get-go. And so my colleague does a thorough inspection. I was there. Photographs everything, gives the client a full-on report, multi-page, and even explained to the client how to trap mice better because there was a mouse trap on the floor and it wasn't positioned properly, and basically informed the client that they didn't really have a significant issue. There was no scare tactics. The problem that the client was claiming to have was fairly minor, in terms that it could be handled in a different way, but that would have been an extra cost to handle that particular problem. But in terms of the integrity of the house itself, there was no brazen example of the animal that the person was complaining about was in the structure itself. It was just simply on the exterior of the structure. And that would have been, a relatively simple possible solution to resolve it, but that would have been an extra cost. But the bottom line was, there was no scare tactics. He wasn't simply inventing a ghost animal in the attic and then selling him a full-on exclusion, blah, blah, blah. I mean, he was really doing the job right. The lady seemed completely fine at the house. My colleague was spending some time there. I was taking some photographs and learning some things, picking up some items, and, it seemed like a run-of-the-mill type of call, in terms of the inspection and what the advice was to the client. And then all of a sudden, later on that day, my colleague's getting a phone call from the lady, and she's angry that she spent this money, and he's like, well, I told you that this was what it was about before we even arrived. And what you have here, in my opinion, is a classic case of buyer's remorse. And that sometimes people get into a panic, they get concerned, and they make a call, and they want to come out, and you tell them, you don't use the scare tactics, and you basically say, look, the fear that you may have had, or that isn't really a problem or it's a much smaller problem than you thought. And so the person saying, well, I spent all this money, and they don't feel the satisfaction. It's sort of like when you go to a doctor and you spend, we'll say $150 for an office visit, and they say, yeah, you have a cold, go home, take some aspirin or Tylenol or whatever the doctor told you to take, and you're fine. And you're like, well, I want the codeine, and I want the cough syrup, and I want this, that, and the other thing. I want the antibiotics. And you're angry at the doctor for telling you something that you're not as sick as you thought you were, or that you just need to grin and bear it and wait till it works its course. It's kind of that feeling, and that's what I suspect this person was going through. My point is that understand that sometimes even when you give quality service and you're clear with what you're doing for the client, it doesn't necessarily mean the client fully heard what you were going to do. And I wish I had an easy answer to give you to solve that problem forever, because the reality is humans are too complex, and there comes a point where you could try to say, well, initial here, initial here, initial here, initial here, and it doesn't mean the person's actually listening to you. You could try to explain all this over the phone, but sometimes when people are under stress, their frontal cortex shut down because of the adrenaline, and they're simply frustrated and angry. They want someone to come out and take care of it. So my point here is I want you to understand that this is going to happen to you. I hope it doesn't happen very often, but I want you to understand that this can, and if you're in business long enough, it will happen. So how do you avoid this? My answer is you can't. What you can do is reduce the likelihood of it occurring. So this means that when you're talking with the client on the phone, that you're pre-qualifying them, that they understand what they're getting to the extent that you can make that possible for them to understand. Number 2, always be giving them quality service. So if you're doing an inspection, you're giving them a quality inspection. You're giving them a thorough inspection. You're giving them documentation. So if you're not finding problems, you're saying, look, I haven't found any problems. And that's part of the deal, but you're always telling the truth. The good, the bad, the ugly, but you're always being frank and honest with them in a manner that's not creating paranoia, and it's not understating problems when they're real problems. And then you have to understand that sometimes, even when you're doing that and you're answering the client's questions and you're getting the money, sometimes a client may still not understand. And they're angry because now the adrenaline is gone and they're looking at the bill and they're getting buyer's remorse. But there's also another type of client. A client who is manipulative, who thinks that they're going to hire you and then they're going to threaten you with bad reviews on your website or bad reviews on whatever type of business service that's out there, and put a bad review of your company out there because they're trying to use it as a form of blackmail to get you to lower your price or refund some money and basically get you to work at a lower rate than what you've basically charged your business at. Now, you have a couple of choices with those types of people. You can simply knuckle under and give them some money and make them happy. Doesn't guarantee you're going to get a good review. You may just lack getting a bad review. Or you can dig in your heels and simply say, sorry, that was the deal. I've done what I promised that I would do for you. That was the price. Sorry, you're upset about it. And then recognize that you may be dealing with a client who simply goes on a rampage and tries to smear your company online. Now, that's a terrible thing, and it's painful for people. You try to have a good business. You try to take care of your customers. You're trying to do an honest living. But understand that even though you're getting a bad review, you really don't want awesome reviews all the time. Now, that's really counterintuitive because, frankly, if you see something and you get 4 out of 4 stars on everything all the time, doesn't it seem a little fishy to you? So you want to have, at times, some bad reviews, but you may want to consider, you could often have the opportunity to respond to those bad reviews. And that allows people, because sometimes, as terrible it is to say it, sometimes clients are jerks and they're just angry. I mean, maybe your client called you and they're angry because they looked at the bill, and it's not because they're angry, it's because maybe their spouse came home and started a hissy fit about the price. So the client may not even have a problem with you, but their spouse may have a problem with you. So there may be some dynamics in those relationships that you're not even privy to. So my point here is that understand that sometimes you can do everything right and still have a bad experience with your client. That's just the nature of running a business today. But I also want you to always consider, did you do your best, or did you do your standard quality work with that client? And so it gives you an opportunity to do a gut check when you have these criticisms and critical clients. And sometimes when they're unfair, and you have to ask yourself, are they unfair? Are my prices too high? Did I fail to properly communicate to them? And my point here is, if you think you were wrong, man up or lady up and correct it. You know, sometimes the client is wrong. I don't believe the client's always right. I think that's bunk. If you believe that, God bless you. That's not my philosophy. But I don't think for a moment that the business owner is always right either. And sometimes you may have had a bad day. Maybe you cut corners when you were talking to the client. Maybe there was a miscommunication and you tried to make things right. Work on the way you talk to patients. Learn with your clients. Learn on your processes. Think about what you're doing, because when you're dealing with wildlife, I can't speak as much for insects, although I suspect that people with bed bugs are highly stressed, maybe some cockroaches. But when it comes to wildlife, sometimes people, especially when they're scared, they're stressed, especially if they think something is in their home and it could interfere with them, sometimes the stress level is quite high. You want to make sure your client understands. It's sort of like, you know, when I was a school teacher, one of the things they would say is never try to reason with a kid who's in a rampage, because their adrenaline is so high, they can't reason with you. So you can provide a mountain of arguments and rationality and reasons. The kid won't hear you because their brain is bathed in a pile of adrenaline. Sometimes that happens with your clients too, and only after the stress is gone can they really fully appreciate what you're telling them. Now, what does that mean? It just means that you want to be sure, to the best of your ability, that you're clear and transparent about your fee processes and what you contribute to your clients. It may help you to have a page on your website that says, when you hire us, what should you expect? Visit 1 or visit 2. And so you may want to think about something like that. You want to get your script down and always think about, how do I make this script cleaner, more understandable, better, so I can reduce the risk. But I'll tell you, I don't believe for 1 minute you will always eliminate these types of problems, because sometimes clients are trying to rip you off. And sometimes clients, no matter what you do, won't understand until the adrenaline is gone. I know this is kind of a depressing podcast for you today, and I'm sorry about that, but I want to encourage you to look. If you have occasional issues with some clients like this, look, it's probably not you. If you're getting a lot of them, it's probably you. You know, if you're getting more than, let's say, 1 out of 40, 1 out of 50 clients doing this, I'd be evaluating your processes. But if you're getting, less than that, then you're probably fine. And you just have to realize that some people never listen. And sometimes you may have gotten a spate of clients who just simply are trying to rip you off, or maybe there's some financial stress. But always take the opportunity to evaluate yourself. Understand this is one of the downsides of running your own business. It's part of the job. Correct problems if you've made problems, but stand your ground when you didn't, and be polite, kind, and realize it's just part of doing business. And then also think about, how are you as a customer? How do you treat vendors? And see things from different perspectives, to be truthful, honest, and fair. And that's what I hope you're going to take away from this today. I'm Stephen Vantassel, wildlife control consultant. Hey, be safe out there. Have a great day. Back to you, Frank.
Thank you for listening to the Pest Geek Podcast. If you have enjoyed the Pest Geek Podcast, please give us a rating, write a review, or subscribe to the channel. You can join the Pest Geek Society by visiting pestgeekpodcast.com. Thank you for listening. See you next time.